Alright, guys. Let me restart this recording. I was about 7 minutes in, got distracted by the mail. So, alright, I could do better and be a little bit more focused on this. So, the Four Agreements, pages 43 to 46. 46 is the end of the chapter. So it's not a full page, it's just a couple lines, and then goes into page 47. That's going to be the second agreement that we'll talk about next time, but we're wrapping up the first agreement today. So talking about the first agreement while I'm hydrating this morning, it talks about gossip and point of views, and only receiving negative words from others if the mind is fertile, to basically attract black magic versus attracting what they call white magic, which is love. So I'll dive into those two concepts. That's kind of my interpretation of what the concepts were saying, and then I'll talk about some specific examples of my own life. So they mentioned something about gossip that I'm very curious about gossip, because I'm like, what is the purpose of it? It's like I feel shitty when I'm gossiping, and when I hear gossip I also don't feel like great. Like there is a little bit of like a bit of a dopamine kind of like, ooh, like new information, like like some weird kind of like thing, like there is some kind of like energy to it that's kind of like I kind of want to hear, but I kind of feel bad too. It's almost like, this isn't the same thing, but like almost like when I watch a podcast, that's not what I meant to say. Almost when I watch like a horror movie, because I'm very sensitive to like horror movies and stuff, and so I tend to not really indulge myself. But stuff with like alien abductions and all kinds of like ghosts and supernatural stuff and monsters and all those things, I don't tend to really enjoy that content, or like horrific historical content like about the Holocaust or slavery or genocides and all kinds of different just dark things. I tend to not really enjoy that, but sometimes I might go down a rabbit hole with some of it too, and it's like there's a part of me that's like, this is a terrible idea, it's going to affect my sleep, I'm going to be having these thoughts about it, like it's going to be something that's like in my memory it doesn't give me any value. It's like current entertainment that gives like a little bit of like a kind of a rush or an energy, or like a, I don't know if it's a rush, it's more like a I don't know, it's not a rush. I don't know what you would call it. What would you call it? Maybe a bit of a rush. It's very mild. But it's noticeable. It's kind of like something that I'm like, okay, like I don't need this in my life, but I'm still like gonna watch it. And I kind of feel the same with gossip. It's like, I don't need this in my life, but I'm gonna sit and watch, listen to somebody tell me this stuff that I don't really need to know. It doesn't benefit me, that I know is going to make me feel somewhat more negative later on, or at least when I think about it in the future, it's going to be like, ew, like this was like kind of negative, gross, like I didn't need to know what Stalin was doing or what Hitler was doing, or like, like I think to some extent, it's like, yes, be educated about history, but it's like, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not really doing it for the education. It's more so for the, I hate to say it, maybe there is like an entertainment value to it, even though I find it disgusting. It's like, I'm still kind of like tuned into it and kind of want to know what's going to happen. And it kind of does something to my emotions. And I feel like gossip only almost hits that same chord. I don't know if it's the exact same thing, but like, that's the only thing that I can find that feels a little equivalent. Is like, okay, there's like this gross feeling thing that happens that I notice, that I don't completely avoid, at all costs. It's like, and I know that there's a negative consequence to it, more negative than positive, right? Like, I don't think there's any real positives to gossip. It is very common, though. It's a very common thing in social interactions, but I would not call it, beneficial. I don't think it's beneficial. I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to kind of create some form of solidarity, or I don't know what it's supposed to do. Like, the book talks about point of view, such as, people can use gossip to kind of prove their own point of view on something. And I started thinking about my recent days, and I was like, have I experienced any gossip? And I think I identified some on Saturday. So today's Monday. I've only really been talking to some friends online, kinda to my mom. Not really, like, there's nothing deep, just kind of like I saw my mom in passing once the mail came. I gave her the mail. I took my mail out, gave her the mail, the rest of the mail. And then so yeah, that was one thing. And yeah, today basically, yeah, today's Monday. I mostly talk to my friends online. Just caught up a little bit with some friends that used to live in San Diego. Caught up a little bit with some other local friends. Caught up with a crush. Caught up with a friend who, from where I used to work. Those are the people I've caught up with. None of it was gossiping. It was all just kind of like, what you been up to, what are you doing, kind of stuff. Like, I talked a little bit about this crush situation to my work friend, but it wasn't I basically just mentioned kind of like the history that I have with the person, but kind of vaguely, like how I know them and stuff, and why it's kind of awkward. And then so yeah, I haven't really talked to people today past that level. I would say Sunday, yeah, I was talking to the work friend also. Filled in some friends about the drag show. Told some friends that I've got a couple friends getting married. I don't think that would be considered as gossip. I just kind of mentioned it, like, there was no real details attached to that. I would say Saturday there was some gossip. And so, me and my friend were kind of catching up about a third party, and I kind of explained, how this person mentioned, like, that they don't really, that they're aware but aren't really fully controlling their actions in certain friendships and stuff, and with certain social interactions and people they're interacting with, that they're kind of like noticing that they're losing friends, and noticing that they're kind of like burning bridges in a lot of social ways, but they also aren't controlling themselves from the behaviors that they're doing that are kind of making it so that people are kind of avoiding them more. So I did kind of say that to somebody that knows this other person in common. So that probably didn't really have to be said, but it was kind of like, I think that came from a place of worry and frustration on my end. I don't know if it was so much to try to like spread my point of view, maybe somewhat. I mean, if that's what you want to call it, spreading a point of view that, I don't like what they're doing. That I'm kind of like annoyed. Like, I don't know, I can get pretty impatient with people who just are kind of crossing boundaries socially and stuff like that. And I've had experiences with somebody who's been kind of like crossing boundaries socially in certain ways, where you kind of tell them like, hey, this bothers me when you do this, can you stop? And then they don't stop, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, yeah, it's also on my end to make those decisions about who I spend time and energy with. Like, I don't have to have a person in my life that's doing that. I don't have to keep inviting them back in, or talking to them, or engaging with them, or making plans with them, or texting them, or anything. If they're not really at a place of their own personal development that is something that's going to kind of match what I'm trying to do, I don't really have to get frustrated in dealing with that. So I do make the decision to engage with this person, even though they kind of do certain things that I'm just like annoyed by. And it's not all the time, but it's also kind of like, it's a bad decision on my end. Kind of. Like, it's not, I don't know. The thing is, I have options, so I'm never really stuck with this person when they're doing the stuff that they're doing. I could always just independently do my own thing. I mean, this isn't the exact example, but say, for example, if when I visit them, I get a hotel room and then they order a bunch of room service or something, and I keep telling them not to do it, and then they do it. It's like, I would have that's not a real example at all, but I would have the option to not visit this person. I would have the option to not invite this person to my hotel. I would have the option to meet them outside the hotel and not have them in a position where they could order the room service. There's options there, right? So it's like, if I know that somebody's gonna do something that annoys me, that's that specific situation, I have the option to avoid inviting them into that situation so that they could do it in the first place. And so it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, I have to take ownership of myself being annoyed because of myself inviting this person to these spaces in that way. Like, there's avoidable, it's avoidable is what I'm trying to say. It's like, I can avoid them frustrating me by not putting myself in situations where they can behave the way that they're behaving. But I make the choices not to do that, because there is a convenience to me. It's like, well, for the example, if there's a hotel or whatever, which that's not true at all. None of that has anything to do with anything. I'm making this up. It's convenient for me to not have to leave the hotel. So if I'm visiting them and we're hanging out in their city, it's like, well, I already spent money to come here, so it's less money for me to have them come over than it is for me to like Uber to them, right? I wouldn't have to wait, because you know how it is when you Uber somewhere versus, if somebody picks you up or whatever, like you have to, like, you don't always arrive exactly at the right time, and I'm working on myself and on my own stuff and on my own energy. I really don't have the time and space and energy to be trying to deal with somebody who's not working on their own stuff. And so it's one thing for someone to be aware of their problems. It's another thing for them to actually want to try to fix it and do something to try to fix it. But it's like, I feel like the problem that I have, is like trying to keep things so convenient on my end that I'm willing to get in a position to let someone kind of push my boundaries a little bit. And then I'll get annoyed with it. So it's kind of like, okay, if I'm, in that position, then I need to maybe inconvenience myself a little bit more. Like, it is kind of like an inconveniencing thing. It's like, well, if I were willing to inconvenience myself by meeting this person at a bar or meeting this person at a club, and I Uber myself there and Uber myself back to my hotel, there's no way this person would be ordering room service because, or even if they were ordering room service, I could make them pay for it and be like, dude, you ordered this, you gotta pay. Like, I don't want it. Like, you should pay for it because you ordered it, and being more assertive and setting pretty firm boundaries before we even meet at the hotel if I know that they're gonna go do that kind of thing. So, and say if they've lost friends over those situations before where they're always ordering stuff, inconveniencing other people, because of their behavior, and other people are just like, they'll write them off and just be like, I don't want to hang out with this person or talk to them anymore, or they're maybe even getting fired over certain things, and losing different friendships because of it. It's like, that's not my responsibility to kind of like have that person manage their own selves and their own personal life, right? Especially because they're aware of it. I mean, that's going to be up to them to try to work on it and make the decisions that they need to make for their own social life. But if it is kind of pushing everybody away, then that's kind of their own fault, in my opinion. But it seems like most people aren't giving it that many chances, and I'm kind of willing to give it more chances, so that's on me. But I'm not beating myself up over it, but it's like when it came to like the gossiping, and I wasn't like delving into like too much detail other than just that, like other than what I said earlier about how I described like that person's awareness, and I didn't even explain like, oh, I'm frustrated with this or whatever. I was just kind of like, that's kind of their choice. That's up to them. Like, if they want to not do anything about it, that's their own business. But, it's because somebody else asked me how that person was doing. And, I didn't even think, oh, like, this is going to be gossiping if I say this. I kind of knew, like, once I started talking, I was like, okay, I'll keep it vague. That's kind of the last thing we were talking about, but I don't think I needed to say much more than that. Like, that was already plenty. But yeah, I would consider that gossip. I mean, the third party person had no information about that person, that part of this person's life before I mentioned it. I could have just said like, oh, they're doing okay, or oh, they're just working or whatever. I could have just kept it vague and not really said anything of too much detail. I didn't have to talk about it at all, about what I was talking about with that person at all. But I was mentioning it because I was frustrated with the person. Because it's kind of like I get inconvenienced by them because of what they do, even though it's not recent. Like it was, I've had, or like in the past, been inconvenienced by this person because of the way that they still continue to act, and that now that I know that they're aware of how they're acting, I kind of like left the conversation at that. But I was kind of like, well, why the fuck are you gonna keep doing it then? Like, that's kind of your own decision to stop. But I do kind of realize my own role too, where it's like I don't have to be, inconvenienced by a person. If I have options, I have options I can take. Is basically what I'm trying to say. That I'm choosing not to take because I'm inconvenienced by those options. So instead I allow this person to inconvenience me with their behaviors, versus me inconveniencing myself. It's kind of like either way I'm inconvenienced by this person, either because they can't get it together. So if like in the scenario like that I made up, like if I'm visiting this person, I have to like if I'm visiting with this person, I end up having to deal with them in that way. Like I'm visiting them, and that's kind of something I have to deal with, because I'm visiting them. It's like I'm either going to be inconvenienced having to spend extra time and money and effort to kind of get to them, to get to meet them, or just I could just not visit them, or if I do visit them, just go and see them outside of the hotel versus allowing them to come inside the hotel and order room service. Like that's just an example I'm giving. It's not, has zero to do with what the actual situation is, but it's something along those lines where it's like it's easily avoidable if I would just make a different decision on my end. I could still hang out with this person because either way I'm getting inconvenienced when I hang out with them, and that's what's frustrating. It's like either I'm gonna have to inconvenience myself by keeping them away from the hotel room so that they can stop ordering room service, or I'm going to have to inconvenience myself by allowing them to come in and expect that they're going to control themselves, with which they already know that they're not controlling themselves, and they've already mentioned that they're not controlling themselves and losing friendships and things, but they don't seem like they're ready to deal with that. Maybe my own opinion is that, that it's like a self-sabotage with like intimacy and things like that. It's like, well, if you have a behavior that is pushing people away, if you keep doing it, then people aren't going to get close to you. So it's kind of like you can start relationships with people, but then none of them will develop deeper because nobody's going to put up with this BS, most people won't. And so it's like, well, if you know that that's bothering people, then stop doing it, you know what I mean? But it's like, it seems like they're not ready to stop doing whatever they're doing. And so I don't think I really need to engage with somebody who isn't trying to, do their best with their social life. Because that's something I value. Because I even worry that, like, this person, when they're around other people that I know, I'm like, I don't want them affecting the relationships I have with other people because they have bad boundaries. And so I've kind of had to put a lot of stuff in place because of their behavior. And it's kind of like, I can stop hanging out with them. That's an option too. Just ignore them and stop hanging out with them and stop making plans altogether. And you know, yeah, that's an option. You know, and I do find it kind of frustrating with people in general, where it's like, where people have bad behavior that they know bothers people, but then they still just do it, and they're aware that they're doing it, but they don't seem like they're trying to like change, even if it might bother them. They just aren't ready, and it's kind of like, in my opinion, I don't think that that person's really ready to be fully having relationships socially. And I value having deeper connections in my relationship. So it's like, if this person can't really have those, then maybe there's no reason for me to be trying to, interact, because it's like, there's not really going to be depth, because this person's going to keep finding different ways, even if it's not the one way, the room service way or whatever. They're going to keep finding ways to push boundaries because they know that they're not ready. They might find a new method. Like, if I start meeting them, Ubering to like meet them where they can't order room service, now maybe they're going to try a different behavior that's going to push me away or push somebody away or whatever. Like, they just keep on doing it. And I don't know if they apologize. I don't think they apologize. I don't know why they're doing it. I have no clue why they're doing it. Well, I think I do. I think I know why. I think it is kind of like fear of intimacy kind of thing. It's like the push the pull, like, I want you, leave me alone. But that's kind of like their way of like, I want you, I'm nice to you, I draw you in, but then I'm going to get on your nerves till you don't want to interact with me anymore, because you're going to be literally telling me, hey, stop doing this, and I'm going to keep doing it. Because once it gets to that point where people are literally like, hey, stop, and then somebody's like, no, it's like, that's not okay. And I've seen them do it with other people in person too, and it's kind of like, that's not okay. More than once, and they know that it's wrong. They've mentioned that it's wrong, so I don't really know. Like, what you can call that what it is, like, there's not really much I can do on my end other than make the decisions I need to make for myself. But talking about the specific situation with this specific person to somebody else isn't gonna change the situation. Like, maybe it'll help people empathize with me, but at the same time, it's like, I'm at fault too. Like, I'm not innocent in this. I think sometimes, when it comes to gossiping, there can be times where there is like a completely innocent victim, like somebody who, like, if somebody walks up and smacks some person, if person A walks up and just smacks person B unprovoked, there's nothing going on, and then they just smack them or whatever, and then person A goes and tells everybody, oh, this person was rude and they smacked me, it's like, okay, that's different than like, situations where it's like somebody's continually doing something that's like toxic or annoying or frustrating. That's different. It's like, you could have a good relationship with somebody who all of a sudden just smacks you for no reason. Understandably, a person's going to get upset about that. Understandably, they might want to vent about it to somebody. Would it be gossip? I mean, yeah, but it's kind of different when, I think it's kind of different when someone's been victimized by somebody, and you're kind of able to, like, when someone's been victimized by somebody, and nothing's their fault, and they're just venting to others, maybe warning others, trying to get support from others. To me, that feels different than like a situation where it's like, yeah, maybe in my experience with this fictitious story I'm making up, this person has victimized me, as in like crossing my boundaries, but also I have options that I have not taken, even though I know that I'm aware that I'm not taking those options because they're inconvenient to me. Um, and so I don't know. And I do think with gossip, to some extent, sometimes people feel like there is that kind of like, this person has crossed my boundaries or has made me a victim to their ways to some extent. A lot of times gossip can be that. Um, but I don't know. There's not really a lot. There's not really a lot that's like super easy to explain. Um, it is kind of the situations do kind of vary. I need to roll down the windows. It's actually getting a little warm in here. Alright, and close the door. Sorry for all the noise, guys. But I'm in the car as usual. But yeah, that's kind of one way I've kind of looked at it. It's like, I mean, there's definitely different angles to, gossip, but, with my own specific recent experience, that's kind of how I kind of boiled it down. It's like, I do have options to not let this person frustrate me. If I do want to keep them in my life, I'm going to have to be inconvenienced somewhat by making the decisions I need to make so that they don't have the opportunity to cross boundaries of stuff that I've clearly told them in multiple different ways that I don't approve of or appreciate the way that they're behaving, and they cannot seem to control themselves, even though now they've even admitted that they know that what they're doing is bothering people and pushing people away. And so it's like, that to me is even more frustrating. But I'm like, that seems like an issue they're going to need to deal with on their own. But everybody kind of has their own issues, and that's not up to me to tell somebody what they have to do. It's going to be up to them. Once they're ready, they're going to figure out that they shouldn't do it. And if they want to burn every bridge along the way, that's up to them. But for myself lately, I really don't have the energy to really be putting into other people's problems right now. Like, I know I've got like family that's got stuff going on, and I'm kind of just like avoiding even like interacting with them on it. I'm just kind of like, you know what, I'm over here doing my own thing, living my own life, trying to protect my own energy. Like, I don't have time for other people's problems right now. Like, so I'm just not gonna engage with anything that has to do with anyone wanting or needing anything from me right now. Like, I'm just not really into it. Like, I'm gonna be selfish, and that's just how that's gonna be. I don't really wanna I don't think I should have to bend over backwards for anyone or lend a hand if I don't feel like it. I wasn't raised like that, I was definitely raised to be like overly giving of myself, but I just don't think that this point in time in my life is the time to do it. I might reevaluate later this month. At the end of the month is Pride Month, so I'm doing a lot of self-care this month. I'm motivated towards my own health, meaning my mental health as well. And if I don't want to do something, I'm not going to do it. So I mean, there are some people who have like reached out for some help or support with certain things, and I've helped them because I wanted to. or said that I would help them. Maybe they didn't really need my help after they asked, but said I was going to help them, and then ended up not doing it because they didn't really need me to do it anymore. But you know, that's kind of where I'm at with things. Like, I'm working on my own stuff. I don't really need to be putting my energy into other people right now, if I don't feel like it. I've got a friend who's got a birthday coming up, and it's down in San Diego, and they were kind of like, oh, like, it's gonna be on this day, and I think I might be down in San Diego like 2 weekends in July, and I'm like, I don't want to go a third weekend, you know, and have to like take a trip to Africa all in the same month. You know, it's like, I don't want that, you know. That's not really what I am seeing for myself. So because I don't want that, I'm not gonna do it. It's just too much for me, you know, and I'm trying to save money. I'm not trying to, like, you know, go all the way down there. Like, it's not like it's free for me to go down there. But yeah, there's all this stuff that I'm kind of working on, and you know, a lot of things that are coming up where people are kind of needing me to do this or needing me to do that, and I'm just like saying no to everything, which is weird for me. Like, there's another part of me that feels like guilty, that it's like, oh, well, I didn't bend over backwards for this person, you know. I didn't let this person overstep my boundaries. I didn't let this person take my energy and leave me in a frustrated position or angry or irritable position, you know. I didn't let this person do that. And so I start to feel guilty about it. Like, even with this person, with the that's the friend that's overstepping the boundaries, like, if they were like, yeah, let's meet at your hotel, and, you know, I would feel probably guilty if I said no, even though I know that I'm going to be the one in the end who's stuck with a bill that I don't want to pay for, you know, or something like that. You know, it's kind of like, I'm not, and again, that's not the actual example at all. Like, I have to give something to work with. You know, I have to have an example to work with to kind of try to talk through the topics. But I mean, I don't mind using personal examples, but I'm also not trying to like throw people under the bus, or be like, but you know, I do think I'm kind of trying to determine if it's okay for people who've had an experience of being a victim to someone else who oversteps boundaries, if the person who's a victim is responsible to not talking about that, and to what extent is it okay to share it with somebody? Like, is it okay to, I think most people would say, if you have a therapist or a pastor or priest or something, and you're like in a confession or a prayerful environment or a therapeutic environment, you can talk about any of your grievances for the most part, and that is an appropriate space to do that. Is it appropriate to talk to other people who know the person, to explain the situations that are going on and kind of like spread their business about what they're doing, the behaviors and everything? I would say it's probably not the best of ideas, but I mean, if you're fully a victim in a situation and there's nothing that's kind of like where you're at fault at all, at the moment I'm kind of coming to the conclusion, like, if you were fully wronged by somebody without being provoked and without any kind of options on your end where it's like you have options, even though it is the other person's fault to make you a victim, it's also our own fault for allowing people in our lives. And so, even if it is out of guilt or whatever, you know, is it okay, to talk to anybody about it, to get support from other people who know this person? I think maybe changing the story completely around, like I just did, and, just not even talking about that situation too much, and, not, like, maybe just talking specifically about my own frustration. I don't think there would be any harm or wrong done in that. Just being like, yeah, I'm struggling with this situation with a person unspecified who is putting me in this conundrum where I'm frustrated because they're not, upholding the boundaries, and they are aware that they're not upholding these boundaries, and I'm frustrated with that. And they don't seem like they're willing to change, but the options I have to take on my end are inconvenient for me if I want to keep interacting with this person, and saying that to a friend who knows the person, who can't identify the person I'm talking about or whatever. I feel like that is much more vulnerable than just being like, so and so is a jerk for doing this, and I'm so annoyed, and they did this and then they did that, and oh my gosh, they did this and that, and to like tell all the details about it and everything, versus saying from my own perspective, this is what I'm experiencing and it's frustrating, and I just want to be open with somebody else about it because it's something that I just am struggling with. It's like, that doesn't feel, I think to the ego, that doesn't feel very like to the ego, that feels a little bit more I don't know what you would call it. Yeah, vulnerable, a little bit more like I don't know what other word I could use, but it is a different step to be like opening up to somebody about your own frustrations and emotions about something versus just like blaming some other person, even if the other person is clearly at fault. So I don't really know. Like, I think most of us would be way more likely to just, talk crap about the person and the situation, in all honesty. And to avoid doing that, I think would, like maybe there's some needs that might not get met, like in a way it kind of does feel good to take a situation where somebody has frustrated you, at least for me, if I'm frustrated with somebody, and just to like talk shit about them does kind of like in a way help, in a way, I'm not saying I feel good about it, but it kind of helps. Like it helps to get that frustration out with that person, because it's like, well, they wronged me, so therefore I'm gonna wrong them indirectly. Like they're probably very unlikely to find out what it is that was said about them, but you never know, because sometimes people will, like, I have had friends that gossip, and I've been the butt of some gossip. There was a time where, I've talked about it before, but there was a time where I walked into a room. It was like a church related social event, like people I knew from like some church environment, of course. And I don't think it was like a Bible study or anything like fully religious based. I think it was just like we were playing games, 20 questions, or I remember that night I played 20 questions with somebody, but I think we were mostly just there to like socialize. I can't remember if we were like having a topic or playing a game or watching a video or what we were doing, but there was some kind of socializing before that. And the person whose place it is, that was hosting it, came up to me and was like, "Oh, so, I heard you're not working." And I was like, this was like a long time ago, like after I graduated grad school. And they were kind of like assuming that I'm lazy because I had a master's kind of newly, and the economy had just crashed, and so everything was kind of crappy. And I was kind of like, I'm not working. I actually had 3 jobs at that point, but none of them were too lucrative. Like I was doing like freelance, like websites, business cards, logos for this one very unorganized lady who didn't know what she was doing. And then there was another day, there was another job where I can't remember what I was doing exactly, but I know that was something I did for pay. There was something else I was doing. There were like 2 other things I was doing, but it wasn't like every day. I can't remember if that's the time period where I was teaching this computer class, and I think I made like 30 something per class, and I was teaching maybe 2 classes or 3 classes per week. So it wasn't really a lot of money. It was like maybe around close to like $100 a week for that. Maybe like $100 every so often per project for this person. But I think she only paid me once from what I remember. And I feel like I might have had some other work I was doing that I just don't remember what I was doing. This is like so long ago, guys. But yeah, I remember a friend, like when I was at that gathering, and the person who kind of owned the house kind of confronted me, and we're all around the same age, but like these people were really like judgmental and just really inappropriate about stuff. Like it's kind of weird because like a lot of them never really talked to me like firsthand. They were just like another, like I don't know, I was like an OG at this church, where like I was like there when it was like at the root of things, and then people move into town. So this person was someone who basically, the lady he was dating was from a different church that started interacting more with our church group. Same denomination, but different building, different location in the city. But we all kind of like interacted through churches. All the churches kind of interacted with one another, and well, somewhat. And then so I knew them from the lady from school. It was a straight couple. I knew the lady from school. She was from another church, but I knew her through the religious school. And then she started coming more to our church gatherings and functions and stuff, and being more interactive with our local church group. And then somewhere along the line, she started dating this dude. And so they had a place together pretty much. And this guy was kind of newer. Maybe he had been around for maybe 1 or 2 years by this point. And so I didn't grow up with him. I grew up with her, but I didn't grow up with him. And I probably knew her since I was in like 3rd grade. I probably knew him like a year or 2 before they moved in. And we didn't even really hang out one-on-one, me and him. We never really interacted too much, like other than like through church related functions. And he wasn't like super involved in the church related functions either, so I didn't really see him that much. So for him to have any information about my work status is weird, because it's like I never talked to him or his girlfriend about, my work. And I had actually never talked to my friend about it, about my work either. Because clearly he didn't know what I was even doing. And so he, for some reason, had been telling somebody about my work status, talking to some other person about it, talking to him, that guy, about, that I hadn't been working. And it seemed like it was from a place of judgment, because I don't know how that came up, but they were kind of saying how I wasn't working, and I don't know why that guy decided to come and confront me about it or what. Like, it was none of his business, but I felt uncomfortable because I was in their house. But I kind of set him straight, and I was like, look, I am working. I don't know who told you I wasn't, and then the other guy kind of came up, the one who had told him that, and he was like, oh, I didn't know that, and it's like, yeah, like, well, why, if you don't know that, then why are you telling people that I'm not working, and why did this even come up? Like, like, why would you even tell somebody? Like, if you think somebody's not working and you're friends, like, wouldn't you try to get them a job, or try to help them find work, or ask them, about anything? Like, like, that wasn't the case. Like, this guy wasn't doing that. He was telling other people about, that I wasn't working. And so I'm in this whole group of people having to explain that, yeah. So then the guy who owns the guy whose apartment it was kind of like, oh, so you're underemployed, you're not unemployed. And I'm like, yeah, like, I'm trying, but I'm also like, I think I was trying to also apply for like grad schools or something too. So I was kind of like, I'm kind of in a transitional period. I was trying to get into a doctoral program. I wasn't really trying to focus on like having a job for like less than a year. Like, I was just kind of like, this will do for now, because it pays for my gas and like whatever social interactions I'm trying to like do, and like it kind of paid for my stuff, but I wasn't really yeah, it kind of just paid for my stuff. That's all I really needed, was something to pay for my stuff. I didn't really have a lot of expenses back then. Like, it was really nothing that major, so I don't really know. Like, but it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good at all to come up as, a topic in somebody's house, where I don't even talk to really either of the people whose house it was. And for the person who told them this rumor, for them to be standing there trying to like learn more information. And it's kind of like, I was around a lot of environments like that, where it was just like, it's not really a safe space, and you're like, you walk into a room and people are like confronting you about like weird shit that you don't even know people are telling other people. And it's like, me and that person, we grew up together. Me and the guy who had spread the rumor, we grew up together. And I've even explained to him multiple times how I feel about gossip, and they still can't seem to control themselves on it. So I've kind of just cut myself off from it. I don't need to talk to people that are like that. Like, I think when it comes to people who can't really control themselves on certain things, or who aren't really ready to control themselves on certain things, even though they know they have the issue, like, I'm kind of like, I don't think I need to really be around that, but it is my own fault for putting myself in positions like where people can behave against what they know, like, I don't agree with. And I'm not saying that I'm like asking them to be like perfect or do some other thing, but I'm like, this kind of behavior that these specific people do bothers me. It gets in my way. It interferes with my mental health, with my stress levels. I don't need it in my life. And what benefit am I getting out of the friendship otherwise, like there's got to be something I'm getting out of it, because there's not always the issues going on. It's just like they do come up, but it's not like constant to a point where it's like every single thing they do or say is like overstepping a boundary. It's like there's one thing, So, and I don't expect people to be perfect, but also it's like it is something that I'm trying to kind of tease out in my life and try to figure out, like, okay, what's the best way to approach certain relationships, and I'm trying to kind of figure out what's best for me, because I kind of know what's best for me, but I'm not like 100% sure that I'm really gonna follow through on all of it. So yeah, like that's kind of where I am with some stuff. And yeah, I'm trying. Like, I don't really know what else to really say, but yeah, like, I mean, I'm not gonna be perfect on it. Nobody's perfect on things, but, and I don't know if that's an okay thing to really even say, like, oh, I'm not perfect, and like give myself permission to make mistakes. But I think I have to give myself permission to make mistakes, because I'm gonna make mistakes like everybody does. But I'm trying to learn and do what's best for myself, and not feel guilty about it. I think for myself that would help with any kind of gossiping, because if I already know that I don't feel good about it, and I do have the power and control to change my situation, then I could just do that. But yeah, so let me see. Yeah, and then it talked about only receiving the negative if the mind is fertile. Like, if the mind has like fertile ground to receive that and cultivate it, then I don't know how to change the fertility level to kind of take out the fertility level for the negative and put in more fertility for the positive. I think the next topic is getting into doing what, not letting things get to you. I don't remember exactly if that's how it's worded. We'll see next time. I don't have the book in front of me right now, but yeah, not letting things get to you. That's gonna be hard. I think the first one's already hard as it is. Being impeccable with the word, but it is something that I've already gravitated towards before I even knew about this book. I was like, yeah, that's something that I really need in my life, is to be around people who have that mindset as well, because I feel like I'm okay with it. I can be pretty good with it when I do go into social intentions, when I do go into social situations intentionally, and yeah, like trying to talk through like a certain situation, like I don't really know what I don't really know what else to say about it. But I don't know. I do find it easy to get annoyed, though. To get annoyed with others. But yeah, I don't really know too much about, about how to avoid receiving negativity. Because it says, like, you'll only receive it if the mind is fertile to grow it, you know? It's like otherwise it kind of bounces off of you, right? So like I don't know what it is that I'm doing for my mind to be fertile. I do think, just offhand, like thinking about like my past history, being involved in like this religious environment where it was really socially unhealthy and unsafe for me on a lot of different levels, like, and I didn't gravitate towards it, didn't feel like I could have like a really authentic connection with a lot of people. Like I do remember when I was growing up, I kind of was like, I really want like deeper, authentic connections with people. And I kind of noticed like I had to keep things surface level, because if I didn't, then other people were gonna like, you know, it would kind of open me up to have other people taking advantage of how I was, because there were a lot of people that just had just some wild ways of, you know, interacting with people, just totally unhealthy. And you know, I was vulnerable to that. And you know, because I was social and talked to like all different types of people, the popular ones, the not popular ones, the older ones, the younger ones, like everybody, because I was an OG, had been there from, you know, from the get-go. And since my youth, since I was like 5 years old or so, I saw a lot of new people coming in, and I'd been there a lot longer than most of the people. My family had been there a lot longer than most of the people. I grew up with the pastor, with the pastor's kids, when we were in a really, really tiny church. And then that church had to close for whatever reason, and then merged with another church in another area of LA. And, you know, there's always some kind of tensions, but, you know, it was just, that was most of my social circle, and I didn't like it. And I remember when I went to a public school for 2 years, and I remember how hard it was socially to kind of like get my shit together, because I was like, okay, like I'm in this new environment, but I came in with that same like religious ego mindset that I would always have when I was around my religious environment. And so I did find it hard to like figure out how to connect with people, because, you know, I went from being at a school where there were very small class sizes, but again, I was like an OG. You know, my dad was like besties with the principal, like the principal was part of the church too. You know, my parents were friends with the pastor. Like there was all kinds of stuff where it was like there were all these like OG kind of like connections. And I remember being like really like involved with a lot of different stuff, and feeling like, you know, when I wasn't in the church environment, I was not familiar of how to really interact in a non-church environment. So when I was at the school, you know, I was able to be sarcastic and kind of a bit of a jerk, you know, a lot of profanity. Like none of this was like authentic to me. It was like ego, you know, like put up a wall, you know, gossip about people, use bad language, you know, talk about like different racial stuff, you know, debate, argue about religion, try to prove your point of view about stuff, and really like, you know, just driven towards, you know, trying to act a way that I really wasn't, you know. Like I'm really, you know, a sensitive, mild, calmer person, but I never felt like I could really be that way. I always felt like I had to be more insensitive, more like direct and rude and sarcastic, and you know, that was kind of how I felt like I needed to be, because like I just felt like I needed to act in those ways, because that's kind of how it worked for me with the church environment, social life. Like, I was always acting like that with those people because everyone acted like that. So it was like you couldn't be like the sensitive one. Like, I did have a friend that I met that I often kind of talk about, wondering like how. Of course, they're gonna clean the streets right now. Hold on a second. I had this Muslim friend that I made that I started kind of wondering, how would it be? Like, I started kind of wondering, like, how would I have been if I hadn't met this guy, Because I saw not only a sensitive teen and person in their 20s, early college age, but someone who was very religious, not the same religion I grew up in, but was very religious, someone who was male, someone who was sensitive, someone who just, they didn't participate in gossip, they weren't sarcastic with people, they were able to have a sense of humor without being a jerk. They were trustworthy, they were friendly, they were generous, and I never really understood, I always thought, oh, it's because of this person's religion that they're that way, and maybe that's what it was. But I think ultimately people have to make the decision to be like that, Like, one of my friends told me that when they were, when we were all in a class together, but I didn't witness this, but one of my friends who was also friends with him said how they were feeling bad that, like, that friend of mine and another friend in that class had been, drawing all over this really nice guy's notebook. Like, they took one of his notebooks and they took like some art supplies or markers or colored pencils or whatever, and just like, back when people used to have trapper keepers, but it was like one of those cloth type of trapper keepers, so you couldn't even like easily clean it off. And they took his trapper keeper thing and just drew and scribbled all over it. And that was basically it. Or I remember, like, but they said that I was like, how did he react? And they're like, he was noticeably like upset and just kind of sat and stared and was quiet and didn't say anything. And my friend was saying how they felt bad about that, and I was just like, dang, like, that's kind of a jerk move. Like, why would you do that? But I kind of get it too. It's kind of like, when you're kids, you kind of do stupid stuff like that, and we're probably teenagers. Probably like 9th grade at the oldest, probably like 7th, 8th grade, likely. And then there was another situation where they, I remember, we would have we play basketball together, sometimes have lunch together and stuff. And I remember that person, on occasion we would, like, I don't know, at this church environment, people didn't really talk much about crushes because it was kind of like a taboo thing, but like, we would kind of talk about that kind of stuff a little bit, like, oh, do you have a crush on anybody? And I wasn't sure that he would have a crush on anybody, but there were a couple ladies that he had a crush on, of the other students. I think 2 of them that I remember off the top of my head. And the other 2 friends kind of, I guess he had told them, like, I knew because I was there listening, but he had told them. And whenever they would see those girls kind of walking past, they would be like, ooh, like, there she is, and like, try to like embarrass him a little bit. Like, they didn't know. I don't think anybody like revealed that about him, but like, they didn't know. And he didn't say anything. He didn't really talk to them. It was nothing like that, but he kind of thought they were attractive or had crushes on them or whatever, and had told that to those friends who were not supposed to tell anybody. He never told me, and they said it in front of me, so I knew. And so it's like, it's not like they weren't telling anybody. And they were kind of like making a little bit, they'd make fun of him like a little bit, not all the time, but I would sit there and I'd be like, dude, that's messed up, like in my head I was like, that's not okay to treat this guy like that. And I, like, people weren't really bullying him like that, but there were a few moments that were like, that would be the way that we would all kind of treat each other, and to treat him like that was like, this is a nice, tender-hearted guy who tries really hard socially, and everyone else at that school is just running wild, not trying hard socially too much. Like, not everybody, but the majority of people weren't very sensitive with one another. People would tease each other about all kinds of stuff. But that's kind of that age of how people are. But like, looking back, I'm like, that it just really wasn't a healthy environment. And I was always just like, man, I just hope that when I'm older and I can meet different people, once I have a car and I have like a life and stuff, once I start meeting other people, I can just kind of, once I can start meeting other people, I can just meet people that are more my style of social style, because these people are not it. Like, I'm still friends with a lot of them, they're family friends and stuff, but the way, if people would have stayed the way that they were back then, I was just like, dude, this is not it for me. Like, it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel, like something that I want to cultivate. Like, I did not want to be in that environment with those people. But we grew up together, we saw each other Monday through Friday. A lot of them I also saw on the weekends, and this is like almost every day from like 3rd grade through like probably like, dude, up until, let me see, if I graduated high school in 02, I spent 3 years in community college, so that's till like 06. And then I finished out 2 years at the local, not local, but at, I commuted to college for 2 years once I transferred to a university, so that's at least till 08. And then I moved around 08 for like 1 year, then came back in 09 and had 2 more years of school, so till 2011 or so. And around that time, around 08 to 2011, when the economy was doing really bad, yeah, so till at least 2011 I was interacting with these people. So on a pretty regular basis, I was still pretty involved in church and stuff like that. So if I have the timeline correct, but yeah, like, that was not good. I can just say it right now, that was not good. But I didn't start meeting people that were kind of more the vibe of what I was kind of looking for socially until, well, I met some in college actually, because I realized in like 2003 when I started community college, and then like those 3 years, the friends I made then, I kept most of them probably until around 2011 or so. And so I was still interacting with a lot of them, talking to a lot of them, and had developed a lot of close friendships with people that I trusted around that time. And then, it was college, so I was kind of like in and out of friend groups and stuff, and like nothing major. Like, nobody was like breaking hearts or like unfriending people and stuff, but I would talk, we would hang out, and then like that would develop into me meeting new people, and then the new people, I would develop friendships with them, and then maybe start hanging out with them more and making a little less plans with other people, till it got to a point where it's like these other people kind of like just naturally phased out and we don't make plans anymore. Like, I still probably have their numbers and stuff if I needed to contact them, but I mean, again, a lot of these people were still connected with like the church, and so it's like I still have people in my life like that, where it's like, our parents know each other from church. Like, even if I don't really go to church, I still know these people. They're still on social media. I still might see them on occasion. We still live kind of locally. Now that I'm back in LA, like, I could technically see almost all of these people if I really wanted to, which I don't want to at all, but um, I could, you know. And not all of them were like unhealthy relationships, especially after um, probably from like 2003 on, things started improving a little bit. But once I moved to San Diego, that's when I started meeting a lot of people. Well, no, before that, probably around 2008 or so, I started having better relationships with people. Um, when I went to grad school, I just feel like it's like a more mature group of people. I could be more authentically myself because there was no church people there. I was still considering myself religious and trying to practice a religion and navigate kind of my early career with like these professional relationships through my school colleagues in grad school, and some of them I'm still close friends with, and I think the impressions were good. Like we had a small cohort. I got along good with a lot of the people. I really liked a lot of them, but then I did notice there were some of those toxic traits in some of the other people that were there, that I kind of realized were just like unhealthy. So I kind of stayed away from those people after a while, and just didn't engage with them too much. Like I did, but I didn't, if that makes sense. Like I'd still go out and like have dinner, lunch, whatever, make plans together and stuff, but there was definitely like a group that thought they were better than some of the others, and then there were some other stragglers that like other people just didn't really invite out and stuff like that. And I kind of learned who had problems with who and all that kind of stuff. And one of my closest friends that I ended up dating, they weren't necessarily a popular person. Um, like they were really nice and sweet, but they kind of were, I don't know, like socially awkward maybe, but not really. Like I didn't find it to be awkward. I just thought they were kind of shy. But I do kind of notice, my life is different than a lot of people's. Like when I look around, I'm like, you know, I've got data, as far as like social interactions. I've got data. Like I have a lot of friends that didn't grow up hanging out with a lot of people, and if they did, it was like a small close group of friends. And I feel like that's way way more common than how my life was in reality, that I had access to like larger groups of people, just mostly because of the, like I explained with the churches, is like the local churches would all kind of like socialize their kids together. So there were local religious schools, multiple churches, and then based on what age range you were, you would usually have some other social gatherings. Like there would be like a church, say, in one part of the city that would be like, we're having like a volleyball night or something, and would invite like multiple other churches, and so we would come and play volleyball with them. And like, so there were people that you would see that maybe you went to school with, or maybe you went to church with, or maybe it was just like when there were social events you would see them. So there was a lot of overlap of different people, different social groups, and it was very easy to get in touch with these people and to make plans. And because we all live locally, like once we all got in our teens and 20s, and I would just take the bus all over town and stuff. Some of us had cars, so we started like interacting with all these different groups of people, because we'd be like, oh, that was fun, like let's make plans and meet up outside of like church events, and like we'd start making plans together with other groups of people. And like, so I had my main crew of friends, but then we would also mingle with other groups and like hang out with other people. And I started, the reason why I say I have a lot of data is because I've had experience meeting so many different types of people for so long in my life, just because of the religion I grew up in and the city that it was in, and how it was kind of arranged with their social environments. And there was definitely stuff that I noticed that I didn't feel safe in certain social environments, mostly because of the way people treated one another, the gossip, the backstabbing, the just kind of like loose lips kind of thing, the insensitivity, the sarcasm, all these different things that I was just kind of like, this is just, it makes me feel a little ick. I didn't really like it, but it was just part of the culture, unfortunately. And nobody was calling it out, and I was kind of like, okay, like, I'm at church and they talk a big talk, I hear all these conversations about all these types of social situations that people are saying, like, oh, we need to have good communities, and do this and do that, and like we need to be together, and socialize with each other, and go and hang out, and feed the homeless, and do all this other stuff together, and invite people to church. But in my head, I'm like, why don't we clean house first? Like, why aren't we like taking up some of these other bigger social issues that are like immediately affecting people, and deal with it and talk about it, and not focus on so much like who's breaking the Sabbath, or who's gay, or who's eating chicken or pork or whatever. Like, these things don't really matter. Like, whose church decided to have drums, or like these things that are just like superficial things that like it's really not a big deal. They would rather have multiple services talking about these types of topics versus like the actual stuff that's more intimately involving people's actual social feeling of like safety for their ego, and feelings of like togetherness, and a safe space. Like, there was no real promotion of like safe space. It was more like, come to church because you don't want to go to hell, or like come to church because that's what the Bible says, or what they teach that the Bible says, or whatever is part of your tradition, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it so I mean, I don't mean to go on like church rants. I'm not saying people should or shouldn't go. I'm just saying, like, that's how I was raised, and it was a huge turnoff for me. It still is a huge turnoff for me, because whenever I do kind of interact with some of these types of people, I do kind of still notice that still comes up. And I do think that a lot of times these church environments do kind of promote ego, because there's so much like looking on the outside and seeing, what are they doing? What's that person doing? Are they upholding the rules? Are they following the traditions? And there's a lot of like comparison and judgment and stuff like that. And people are trying to like make themselves look good and make everybody else look bad, or hide stuff about themselves. So the best way to hide stuff is to spread gossip about other people, because nobody's focusing on our own selves. They're focusing on everybody else. And so to grow up in a culture where there's so much judgment, it really just promotes, it just breeds ground, it just makes this fertile ground for social problems that people don't really see as problems. They don't really seem to kind of want to have a lot of control over it. They just seem to kind of do it even though nobody likes it. Everybody feels unsafe with it, but they just like to spread rumors, and it's still going on till today. And it's unfortunate, but I mean, I know a lot of good, intelligent, smart, talented people, and then it's like, it's kind of hard to have to limit relationships with those types of people, where it's like, we have such a long history. Some people I've even known since I was like 5 years old. Some people I've known since second grade, third grade. I'm almost 40 now, and it's like, to have people that have been in my life that long, to have to make decisions to feel safe being away from them, that's a little bit of a challenge on my end, in all honesty. But yeah, to make the ground fertile for love instead of black magic and negativity, to make the ground fertile for love, that's a whole different situation. I'm gonna have to figure out what the difference is for that. But I do think I've noticed, I guess the solution for me, the easiest thing is when I go into a social environment, just intentionally before I leave, to make a point that, I'm not going to gossip. I'm going to pay attention to the stuff that comes out of my mouth. And if I am mentioning anybody's name, I'm going to start watching what I say. I've noticed when I take that approach, I am actually able to follow through with it. But when I don't take that approach, it does get a little bit harder. But it's almost lunchtime. I gotta have some lunch, maybe get over to the gym. This is almost 90 minutes. Sorry that it's long, but, I kind of felt like I had a lot to say on this topic, especially if we're gonna wrap up the topic of gossip. That's probably one of my most, to me, it's a topic that I value a lot, trying to focus on not doing it, because I know how damaging it can be, firsthand, secondhand. I know how damaging it can be, and it's still something that I'm not immune from, and it's still something that I do struggle with on my own. I would say I'm not like a very gossipy person. I don't tend to just gossip all the time and stuff, but I don't not gossip. And so, yeah. But some of the methods I just mentioned, I think I'm going to have to try to implement some of those, even though it's going to be difficult, I know, but I don't know what else to do. I feel like that's the only way to really, try to fix something that it's part of my values to have safe spaces in relationships. And, so I can't be promoting gossiping and stuff like that. It is against my values. So, yeah. But yeah, so with that, I'm going to stop talking and close off this episode. And thanks for listening. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these.